This podcast is brought to you by Ramm Horse Fencing and Stalls, the one-stop shop for your horse farm. Ramm is family-owned and operated and has been in business for over 30 years. We welcome you to call in and speak with an expert about your next project today at 866-653-8984. Again, that's 866-653-8984.
Welcome to Late Night Riders. I'm here today with Gretchen, my granddaughter, Lucas, and Kristen, my daughter. And today we're going to be talking about cost-saving ideas for your barn planning. So, we want to start with...
So let's talk about some things that you can invest in at the beginning when you're building your barn, and then things that you can put in later, something that's not a priority that you can slowly do. I think your number one should always be your fencing, because your horses that's where they are most of the time.
Like 80 to 90% of the time, most of the time, unless you have show horses. Yeah.
And I think you need to invest in quality product. Don't put something up that's going to fail in 5 years.
No. Like I tell people, don't do it twice, do it once. And, you get what you pay for. When you pay for something the first time, do it the first time, don't do it twice.
Yeah, you not only save money, but you save time as well.
Well, there you
go. No one
go.
wants to do anything twice.
No, that's true. Okay.
And we've had fencing that has been up for years and years and years and years. So...
And it could be that you actually have the horses in 100% of the time because you put a shed in there and you find out the shed works just fine for your needs, and you end up not building a barn. So that's one other thing that you have to think about too.
It depends on what your barn is for. Is it for you personally? Is it for boarding down the road? Think about the future of what you're doing in your barn too. So, and you may change your mind in a few years or whatever, a little bit of time. So
yeah. So instead of talking about like an existing barn, if you start from scratch like you are, what are some things that you should consider before, like, with building your barn?
First things first, I would say the first couple of things that you really want to think about is you really want to visualize what you're thinking you would like and get it down on paper. So as if you're talking to a friend, you want to write it down that way so that you keep your core ideas. You can always go back to what you were thinking from the get-go when you kind of can start to get confused as you start to add options in. Secondly, I would think that, to get a barn builder, which is an expense, but to have them come out and give you ideas, tell you how to do things the right way. Again, do it once, because you may find out you did it the wrong way, and then you have an added expense and you have to redo something. So it's good to pay for a barn builder, I believe. You get 3 estimates. Always get 3 estimates at least.
Yeah. The reason we do that is because we find they might be high, low, and middle, but see what you're getting for the value. Again, it's you got to look at what you're getting, because if something's a little bit higher, but you're paying once for it, you're going to save money in the long run.
And not only that, but it's educational.
So if you're looking at a barn builder, what's some things that would stick out to you? Like, oh no, I'm going to stay away from them?
Well, I was thinking, like, social media has been such a big help now, because you can hashtag, whatever, maybe the barn builder's name, or you can find what hashtags they use, what they tell their people to
You're
use.
good with that.
And then you can see the work that they've done, and if other people are happy with it. That is one way that you can look.
Well, I would want to see, are they, like, do they build for horses specifically, or are they building for cattle? It's still a barn. So I would want to make sure that they have in mind, like, oh, there's going to be a hay loft, and there will probably be a place to wash the horses, and make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah, because if they're not talking about the things that you're interested in or giving you ideas, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Then I would be a little leery. So.
And there's so many things that we can do now. If it is something that you would like to do on your own, you are going to have to go and get the permits. I mean, those you have to take into consideration the cost of that, and that you have to do it correctly, that they're going to have to come out and make sure that it's done correctly. You can do these things on your own. You can look at YouTube and, really learn how to build these things, but there's so many things that you might not think about. So again, I would go back to, I think it's important to look at a barn builder.
I want to pop back to the visualization of it. So real quick, around the table. what does your barn look like? What color? How many stalls? Go.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard question, but
That's a hard question.
yeah. I think for me and what we're doing right now, probably just a couple of stalls, and I do like the white barn. White or black, I think, is what I would do, and the real, I will say magnolia kind of style.
Okay.
Well, that took care of that. No, I'm kidding. No. So I'm thinking maybe possibility of 12 stalls, but 10 for certain to start. And then some of the colors that I've seen, though, that go with houses are really pretty. Like the shed that we have out here, the color is like a, what would you call that? Like a
green, like a...
A muted green.
Yeah.
with the trim being like a tan, which is a different color, but I think it's pretty. So maybe even something like that in the style of the
You
barn.
can see that shed on our Instagram.
Yeah. In the style of the barn, all I've ever had is like pitched roof barns, so I don't know. I'd have to think about what I would want, whether I want something above like with a hayloft.
Luke, what do you think?
Well, as you know, I don't have horses, so the number of
But-
stalls would not really come
Yeah.
into consideration.
Sure.
But I am actually a big fan of the galvanized stalls with a darker wood stain on it.
Yeah.
Those
And
are
then
pretty.
I also
I
like
like that,
barn
too.
aisle lights.
Because it's traditional. It's very traditional. It's beautiful.
I personally would love like just a little 2-stall barn that's white and just really clean. But
Enough for you and Beatrice.
yeah,
too.
just for me and my
Your
puppy.
puppy.
Here's a puppy horse stall.
But speaking of 10 to 12 stalls that you were saying earlier, you need to make sure that you have that laid out. Like if there's potential for more horses, you want to make sure that you have enough stalls for that.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. We have 10 right now. And so I don't know if we're going to stay at the 10 or not. So I think with the 12 stall, we'd have enough to,
Get
if we
some
wanted to.
impulse buys.
Well, yeah, I hope not, but never know what's going to happen, right? And then maybe being able to actually look at, though, outside. What I love is we did have on one farm. It was a round shed. Loved the round shed, and
was really
inside,
cool.
inside of the round shed, you'd walk. The door was set like directly like in the center, and so there was a. Like when you walked inside, there was an aisle that went down the center of it, large enough to put your feed, and then you could feed from either side of the shed, and then horses could go in on one side, and you could keep them out from the other, or you could open it up so they could go around to both sides. But I really liked that a lot, and I would like to do that again.
And as cool and interesting as that was, the barn was, I don't know how many feet away from that shed in particular. They didn't plan for the future. It's not a good place there's no good area for a riding arena. And if they would have probably
Very much so.
thought and planned ahead of even, for resale value, if somebody wanted to put an arena in, you have to take out, I don't know how many trees in order to build the arena. And there was so much land to be used that didn't have trees that it's just, those are the things that you really need to think about down the road.
Yep, on the last property, there would be like places available to put an arena. However, it was just made a little too small, or it wouldn't connect to the barn. We really tried to figure out how could we do it.
turnout,
It was
it
pretty
wouldn't
tough. Yeah, it
even-
was just not an easy
And it can be
thing.
done. It's just that if it would have been
Yeah, it
thought
would've been
out, when you
costly,
think
though.
out, these things for later, use, even if it's not for you, it makes it easier for the next buyer.
I think the nice thing about that property was you could look out and see your horses right there.
Yeah.
Whereas like in your past property, it was a good ways, like the barn was a good ways away from the
It was
house.
a distance away. Yep. Yep. So think about where you put your barn, and then also think about your property lines that go around too, because we were talking about when you're developing, if there's ground that needs to be moved and things like that, don't get too close to your neighbor's property line. Be sure you stay within your boundaries. So have this all laid out first before you start to kind of just dig in and go. So, yep. Yep.
The other thing we had talked about is all of the movement that's around there, not only with all of your hay carts and wheelbarrows and people coming in and out, but also you have
Your traffic
Mimi.
patterns.
You have Mimi.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have our dogs.
Our little dog.
The last barn we never even thought about. You can actually make an area for, a turnout for your dogs that while you're riding, they have a place to go too, and it's a safe place for them.
Our dogs aren't the kind that just run around outside,
Right.
So if you did have that kind of a dog, you wouldn't have to think about it, but we don't have that. So we would want to have them in an area that they could stay in, which would be great because even if people come to visit and they have a dog, they don't know the area or whatever, you could have that for them to go into, which is kind of a nice thought. I mean, we do cater to our dogs more now than what we used to.
And it could be an area so that, like, the horses, if they're not used to dogs, wouldn't spook if one ran across.
Yeah, because it's real easy to have a dog get hurt, especially a dog that's not used to it, but even one that it is. You just can't get underneath a hoof. It can be not good. So, yep. So, and I also think about you talking about laying this out so you can think of the least amount of steps to go to your feed room. Which room do you go in all the time? Your feed room and your tack room. How many steps do you want to take to where your horse would be in your aisle to tack up or a grooming stall to tack up or whatever. So you need to think about that. How wide are your doorways going to be into your hay room or your tack room? What do you need to take in and out? Think about all those things, because if you err on the side of larger openings, it's going to be better than small openings, because I know, like, when my hay man comes, he just wishes that I could have an overhead door that would go up so he could just back in and put the hay in, or if we're going to do something with like a bale door up above with upstairs storage, though, that we would have the ability to have that elevator there. So you've got to think about, are you going to do that and have an elevator? Think about those things before you do it, because there are costs involved that you might not think about. If the hay man has to bring the elevator, it costs a little more. So is it worth it? It's up to you.
I would also think about outlets where, like, if you're thinking about putting cameras in your barn, make sure you have an outlet that you can, like, your camera can reach.
And internet.
Right.
Access.
Where are you going to plug in your phone if it starts dying while you're out at the barn? Think about these, so it's not in the other room and something happens and you can't get to it.
But also in the future, if you do one of those build outs for your stall where you're grooming and you have the lights and all of those things, you want to think about putting the lights there. You want to think about putting clippers to plug in. I mean, there's a lot of electricity things that you need to think about with that as well.
Are you going to put speakers in your arena? Are you going to be playing music down the road?
I love music in the barn. I love it. I think the horses do too. That's just me, though, but I love to have music, so I hope I can do that when the time comes. So yeah. Definitely. Yep.
I feel like there are a lot of things to consider, and I also feel like there are things that you can easily get down the road. Maybe you're not moving the horses until summer. You can wait on fans until they get there. There are a lot of different things that you can hold off on.
So things that you can't hold off on, maybe you don't put the electrical outlets in, but the electrical is there ready for you, is the water pipelines. If you ever want to have indoor watering system, you want to make sure that the pipelines are in there before you can't do it afterwards. So you want to make sure they're in there, and then if you want to do a water shut off to each stall, which makes a lot of sense to do.
It does.
It's a cost.
Water ever breaks or whatever, you don't cut all the other horses off, right?
But you don't have to run them right away. That can be something that can be saved for later, but they're there for when you want them. So that's kind of like a must-have if that's something that's important to you or you live in this cold weather like we do.
So you want to think about, too, when you purchase your products for the inside of your barn, that if you can figure out beforehand, getting costs on how much it will be for the total amount that you need. Like if I were going to do a 12-stall barn and I'm only putting 10 horses in, I will cost out all of the stalls to get them done so that the horses would be ready or know what the cost would be. Because when I do buy it all at one time, I know the expenses of purchasing it all at one time is better. Sometimes you can get a volume discount, or maybe even your freight rate would be better for having it brought in.
One-time freight rate.
One time, yep. See if you can find that, maybe the one place where you can get everything instead of having to piecemeal and go around to get it from different areas. and then it costs more.
Do you know what I heard today? One of our account managers was talking, and she's talking to a vet, and the veterinarian and her friend are going to go in on this together. They're waiting to put their order in together so they can ship it together so the freight comes down. So that's another idea too, to save money, is to go in with a friend if you know somebody else is purchasing these things.
I know we're jumping around, but I'm just thinking, if you purchase posts for your fencing, even your half truckloads and your full truckloads of posts, which is 500 to 1,000. And if you're doing a small farm, you don't need that many. But if you're doing something larger, or in the future, you could get those posts right away and save some money. Maybe some of your friends want a fence too, and they can get in on that with
together.
You. Yeah. Or if you're in with a group. I know here we have like the Ohio Horsemen's Council, things like that, people that are involved with horses say, hey, I'm going to buy. You guys want to get in on this? It does help to save.
That's a great idea.
I also know of Tim Sherman, who was on a while ago. They actually, with their neighbor, are very close, and they ended up seeing our fence on his property and said, we want this on ours too. And they ended up doing the property line, splitting it so it would go down both
together. That's a good idea too.
So good things to think about beforehand. So we've kind of talked about like what ideas, put your ideas down on paper, and then your traffic patterns in your barn, buying in bulk or whatever, that way if you possibly can. What else?
I mean, if you want to talk about the timeliness of the project, finding an installer or a contractor, you're going to want to be a little prepared and give yourself some time in advance. If you know you're going to build this barn so many months away, you might want to contact these installers or contractors beforehand. Yeah, a lot of them already have scheduled appointments and stuff. So
very true.
Even with stalls, make sure to see what the lead time is, because sometimes
you have to work backwards.
Yeah.
If you do purchase your stalls and not fabricate them or make them yourself there at your barn, then usually with any stall company, you could be looking anywhere from, I don't know, could be, if you want something that's plain, maybe I don't know.
What are our averages, Lucas?
I mean, if you have like a DIY kit like our Essex or Derby stalls, I mean, we can usually turn it out 48 hours and ship it out. But if you're going to get something custom made or welded, you're looking at minimum 1 month. So you want to start planning ahead for sure.
Even if you're bringing horses into your barn, let's just say that's a good tip to remember, and you need to get stalls put into your barn quickly, just be sure you pre-plan with that. If you're not if it's not a new build or a revamp or whatever, just be sure you plan ahead, because that is something that does take time.
We do get lots of calls in that say our horses are coming, like tomorrow our horses are coming next
and they
week.
Don't know.
Here's the biggest thing. If you have your fence, if you've thought about, if you need climate control for being in the hot sun, wind, rain, snow, at least a shed, as long as you have those things, you can usually get by until you can do the other things, and it's not as scary as not having your stalls ready. The barn is really important, and everybody wants that beautiful barn, but your fence really is the first thing that is, your main thing to get your horses out. Ventilation, it's a natural habitat for them anyways.
Another idea is, if you do have, say, a building and you have horses coming and you're going to use that building for horses, let's just say, you already had a pole barn building or whatever, the stalls that we have that are we call them, they're not portable, but the stalls that we have that you can put together with the connectors, thank you, are really quick and easy to put up, but you do have to pre-plan to order those. But those would be maybe even a faster stall if you have to get a horse in like right away. What am I going to do? I'm in a pinch, so anyway.
So speaking of weather and things like that, crosswinds throughout the barn, that's important.
So when you build your barn, like we've been in several different barns, we all know, having that cross ventilation is a big thing. You can use the wind to work for you. So you need to think about, do I want the wind to come through my barn, through like the stalls, back and forth, or do you want it to go down the aisle? And depending upon where you sit your barn on your property, if you have a lot of trees, if you have a natural windbreak line, something like that, think about which direction you want to place your barn so that you can utilize the airflow the most, because horses need good airflow. Far too often I think we want to close them up inside, and so we can be kind of tucked in, but they need that good airflow. And in a barn where it's dusty, it's good, much better for their respiratory, and yours too. So think about the direction that the wind blows, and think, which way do you want your barn to sit? That's a big thing.
Do they ever do heated flooring in barns? Is that
I'm sure.
a thing?
I haven't, but I'm sure at some point they probably do. And a lot of things that can be done, like down aisles, that like salamanders and things like that can be placed for equine barns that work well, that help to heat a little bit when it's bitter cold. So, or your tack room. Maybe you want to take your tack room and decide that you make that an area where you can cool it off or keep it warm. Put your tack in there so that it's not really cold. You can put your things in there so that in the wintertime you can go grab it, and then it's not as cold as what it would be. But you need to think about that, and then that's a whole nother thing too, to talk to an HVAC person to find out what's the best way to heat maybe a smaller area, or just it depends on how big it is. Maybe you have a viewing area for an arena that you want to heat, so you've got to get those costs on things like that.
And think about, in your tack room, are you going to have a washer dryer? Are you going to have a bathroom? Is the house close enough that you can just walk back to the house? Or are you going to have people... Do you want people going to your house, or do you want it all to stay at the barn?
Right. We did have people in our house all the time because there wasn't a bathroom out in our barn.
When we first started, like into really boarding and that type of thing, we didn't have, and then we kind of grew into understanding, that as time went on and we were able to, we had bathrooms, that type of thing for people to be able to use. But yes, you need to think about that, and depending upon what your discipline is, maybe you're a person who just wants to, trail ride, and you don't want an indoor, but you do want to have the bathroom facilities or whatever. Think about it. What do you want? How much do you want in that barn? Then you can get your cost and start to put it down on paper and get an idea so that you don't go over budget. I think anytime I know when I plan or we've planned for something, we always add a cushion to it, because we know we're going to go a little bit more than what we thought. And so it's a good idea to know that your numbers probably aren't going to be your exact numbers, that you're going to be over that a bit. So pre-plan with that too.
Or it takes longer, and your horses have to board longer, and you need that extra money for the boarding. So in all ways, you need to have an extra cushion. But that's the nice thing, when people call in here and they are planning, we take time to plan with them. And, if they're a year out, they have a year to plan a monthly budget for how much they need to save, or if they've been saving and, they're on top of it already, but they want to have the additional money, to do some of the fun things that they wanted to do. Sometimes, you want your office in the barn, you want a living area in the barn. There's lots of people who, have all of those amenities, and even if you're building those extra stalls and you didn't use them, you can use them for things like that. Hay room, a separate hay room, feed room. We had our actual grain room it's by itself, which we never had before, but it was really nice. We had the boards in there that you could write on to say which horses needed what, and we could, dry erase boards. You could change those out as you needed to. It kept all of the sweepers and everything in there. It kept it nice and neat.
Recently, I met someone. They built the barn first, and they hadn't built the house yet, but they sold their house.
Yep.
I was going to talk about that.
So they lived in their barn.
It's cool.
Yes.
They
that
had
was really
such
neat.
a nice tack room that they just lived in their barn until their house was built.
It's
Yeah.
cute. And you get a few little bird's eye view of what they were doing. That was pretty cool to see.
And you wouldn't know that they were living there. It looked very cleaned up. It looked like a tack room, like a very, very nice living space tack
Quarters,
room.
yeah.
And I will say this: the house horse barns, whatever you want to call them, that I have seen that people have done, they are beautiful. The house is attached right to the barn. If you're thinking of doing a new build, might be something to consider. But they are gorgeous, just absolutely beautiful. And pre-planning for that kind of, the sound and things like that, how close the barn is right to the back door. We have friends that have you walk right from their aisle into their house. It's very cool with the houses attached. And
that was like a dream. Those are like dreams.
Beautiful.
And when you have your dreams and you're excited about them, you really, if you can afford it, that's wonderful. If you can't, come back down, and what can you do reasonably? There are certain things that we have had even, customers tell us that, I mean, one of our biggest things here is we are trying to find the safe products, that are safer. And products that last for a long time. So, if you get pavers that are less than par and you have to, remove those, that's another cost. If you get mats, that are not what you thought they were going to be, that's something that's a big expense that you have to continually, you really want to think about. Maybe not even putting it in, waiting, and bringing your dreams down a notch, so that you can get what you want later. And not everything has to be instant, because it takes time to do these things.
I think the fun part that I like about what we do here is when we talk to our customers, we can talk to them about what their thoughts are that they would like to do. And at least they can get an idea. We can kind of dream with them. And, what kind of flooring do you want for your horses? What kind of flooring do you want in your barn? It's nice to have somebody you can just talk to that will tell you, we've used this. This is why we don't use that or carry that. Or you might want to think about this before you purchase that. And then at least the customer knows they have somebody that they can talk to, because our whole reasoning for doing it was to help people. We're not just here for just our products. We're here to talk. We're equestrians. We like to talk to horse people. So,
I was thinking earlier we had been talking about timelines, and I was thinking about, every DIY show where they're redoing the house, they're either over budget or they are 3 weeks later than what they were planning. I feel like it's the same thing with farms.
It is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. One other thing I was thinking of too is that as you're planning, think about, if you're doing a new build, that the equipment that's going to come in is going to be driving all around. Where are your pastures? Are your pastures right by your barn? Because you're going to get torn up, so you can't help it when you're doing a new build. Think about where your pastures can be, if they can be a little further out, so you can maybe divide your pasture and then let them come through.
Right.
Because
wide gates.
Yeah, wide gates.
Double gates. If they're going to have to drive through to get back to where the barn's going to be built.
So think about those things too, because a lot of times people don't think about that. They might put like an 8-foot gate in. We always say do, utility sized gate, at least 16 foot, even if you put it towards the back of the pasture, and you put a smaller one if you want to use it, but think about having that access, because at some point you may need it. So, yeah.
So it's fun to look at other barns. You need to go look at other barns. Again, I would say visualize that first thing, put it down what you want, so that you don't get confused about where, because you can come all the way out here and maybe you come back to here, or compromise, or maybe you come back to where you started.
You guys know even more so than I do, though, where to go to get ideas, because
I
across
go to
the
Pinterest.
internet,
Yeah,
you
you're
know how to find it.
Pinterest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, you can get how many ideas there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that on Instagram there are dedicated pages to barns, dedicated pages to stables. Stable Style comes to mind. There are people that you can follow that, they just have the dreamiest places, and you might get some ideas from them.
Definitely. Yeah.
I like looking at Blackburn Architects barns that they make.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
I
They're
agree.
beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And we got to see Martha Stewart's barn. It's just gorgeous. I have to say that. It's just so beautiful. Oh, my goodness. It was wonderful to see, some beautiful barns, and then kind of think,
But you know what I was
going
to say to that? She doesn't have a riding arena.
No.
And that's something that, like, as beautiful as her barn is,
She's a trail rider.
She's a trail rider.
And she gets out each week and rides.
Yeah,
So
but that's
it's
something that I
interesting to
would
see.
rather have the arena almost than have, it's just a difference in what you can do and what you want to do. My dream barn, has the arena, but you see these beautiful barns. They're built incredible. One thing about her barn that I do remember is that her hayloft was upstairs. She had a netting around every opening so that the birds couldn't get in, or she couldn't have any rodents or anything get into that area, which was very, very smart. That's one thing to think about too. But if you love a big barn like that, which was beautiful, that we probably wouldn't be able to incorporate with what we're doing, if you can just take a piece of something that you like from that, an idea of something that she did with that,
Martha, if you're listening, I love your barn.
I know I was at a very large facility, and I went back a year later, and she started off just with like one barn. It's like a large boarding facility, and she did a row of our Cambridge stalls, and then she did like a cross section of custom Cambridge stalls. I think she did 16 in her cross section. And then when I went back, all of those stalls were up. They were all stained. They looked incredible. But also,
she did light or dark stain?
She did a dark stain.
Okay, just wondered.
And then she built out. They did a very large arena. And then they were planning on putting a pool in later.
Oh, wow.
So she had all these steps of, first we're going to get this barn settled so we have income coming in. Then we're going to go to the next, we're going to put an arena in so people can go ride.
Planner.
Then we're going to put in a pool for therapy. And then in the middle of all of that, we're going to work on the house up front so I have a place to stay that I feel like good staying at.
As you were talking about that, and you have borders too, I know when we had our borders, think about where you want to put their stalls as opposed to where you're putting your stalls and where the tack room is, so that everybody, the flow of how everybody moves in there and how you want to move in there. I know at one point, we had to have borders so that we could, finances were tight and we needed borders.
Yes.
But you have to think about those things, about how you want your space, because it's still your space and you want it to feel like your space. Sometimes you want your own space. To think about how that flows. So if we would have had their stalls in the front, they would have taken over, we would have had to walk around them.
I think that's an important thing, because we didn't have that and we didn't have our own space, and it was hard because you wanted it so badly. So either, like you say, put the stalls together, and even in your tack room, we've talked about since that time then, if there would be lockers or if there would be a certain area for each person. But then when you have your own, it feels so good, because your barn, if you're doing that and you're looking at having that as a business, though, I still feel like you need to have your own space. Maybe I'm wrong, but, I feel like
I think it is important
it felt
if you
good to have your own space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or even if you just know where you're going to have them put their horses, so that they are, towards, maybe they use the cross ties in the back, you use the cross ties in the middle, or however it goes, but you just have your spaces so everybody knows.
For sure.
Yeah. I feel like there are a lot of things to think about and to consider.
Yeah.
It all depends on what you are going to do. Maybe you are just doing a 2-stall barn, or maybe you're doing a multi-million-dollar facility. There are a lot of things to consider, especially where you're going to put your money first, and then further down the road.
Yeah, and additionally, are you going to do the build, or are you going to go someplace where it's already built? Because you can be saving money one way or the other depending upon what you decide to do. So it's a big thought process. What do you want to do? We've had some of the realtors on that have talked about the different equine properties and things. Well, it's already pre-built, but then it's going to be the way that they had it and not yours. Which one do you want? And how much money do you want to put into that with the planning? It's good to know so you can see.
Yeah, so let us know what you think and your thoughts, and we're going to be possibly building a barn soon, so comment below and let us know what are things that you really like that we should consider putting in our place.
I know we want we want some pretty lights in the aisleway, don't we? We talked about that per stall and things like that,
So many ideas. So be sure to listen. I am sure we'll talk about it as it comes. All right. We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast and encourage you to share with all your equestrian family and friends. You can tune into the Late Night Riders podcast show every Friday night. Each episode will be uploaded exclusively on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest shows. Do you have a topic you'd like to discuss? We want to hear from you. You may email us at podcast@rammfence.com, or feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you again for listening.